Happy Halloween, everybody, and welcome to part 1 of our spooky season Halloween special. Halloween is a special time, not just for me, but for our channel. Every year we roll out the red carpet, or Halloween-colored equivalent, orange? Maybe green, I don't know, purple? Anyway, we always try our best to do something special for Halloween, and obviously the last few years have been a bit, dry, to say the least. So this year, Alex, Kylie, and I were racking our brains to come up with something. Alex had the awesome idea to do a multi-perspective recording of the game Escape the Backrooms. While we all agreed, I still felt like we could do something other than another spooky LP, since every single year we always add a new spooky LP. Don't get me wrong though, I know doing a multi-perspective LP is definitely a bit of an undertaking, but this year I also wanted to do something a little bit different, something that incorporated video games and Halloween, and then it hit me like a truck. Like a white mask, blue jumpsuit wearing truck. Why not talk about Halloween on Halloween? Not the movie, but the 1983 Atari 2600 game. So sit back, turn off the lights, and follow me as we unravel the history behind the creation of this game, its legacy, and its impact on the video games industry. Probably one of the most iconic horror theme songs for one of the best original slasher films of the 1970s, John Carpenter's Halloween, originally released in 1978 on a budget of $320,000. It went on to be the most profitable independent film release ever, at least at the time. Since the late 90s and early 2000s, several films have topped it, however, it doesn't change the cultural impact of the film. Based on slashers like Black Christmas and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which we'll be talking a bit about today, Halloween would be credited with pushing it further and helping with the next evolution of the slasher subgenre. The movie was co-written by Deborah Hill and features music by Carpenter himself. It also features the talents of Nick Castle, Donald Pleasance, Charles Cyphers, and the titular Jamie Lee Curtis. Sorry, I had to. The film wasn't an immediate success and was generally only mentioned through word of mouth. However, it quickly became a cultural phenomenon and has since spawned over 12 more films, several novelizations including a few comic series, 2 video games with another on the way, and plenty of cameos. However, while most of those recently mentioned things have an overwhelming amount of documentation, the original 1983 Atari game still has a story that feels very scattered and a bit disjointed. As such, I took to the internet, reached out to a few individuals, and began piecing everything together in order to create a complete oral account. While there are already accounts on the game's release and factors surrounding its infamous unmarked boxes, I wanted to dive deeper to find a solid order of events and maybe even learn more about the development. To do this, I attempted to reach out to the 2 original developers, Tim Martin and Robert Barber. Unfortunately, neither were available for an interview. However, I found a silver lining. A co-worker and game developer who worked alongside both men during their development of the game, and his name is Cash Foley. Cash and I spoke over the course of several weeks, and he's super awesome. He answered just about every question I had regarding the development and some of the hurdles the game had to face, even before it was released. So before I dive in, and if you're watching this, Cash, thank you again. Our story starts in 1982 with a man named Charles Band. By this time in his career, Band was a well-known entrepreneur who was constantly opening and closing companies, striking distribution deals, and making some of the weirdest movies. In fact, he still makes movies to this day, with some of his most notable directed films being Ginger Dead Man Evil Bong, and the most recent Puppet Master films. He opened several companies including Meta Home Entertainment, which he sold and later became MHE, Empire International, his original umbrella company before he sold it, Wizard Video, his subsidiary company at the time, which focused on distributing B films and horror, Cult Video, which was no longer open, focused on harder and sleazier B movie fare than the usual Wizard Video, and even Force Video, and of course there's Force Video, also closed, focused on art house and lower budgeted B movie fare, including European titles. The last two were technically operated under the Wizard Video moniker. During this time, Ban was constantly looking for ways to get ahead of trends. In an article from his Delirium magazine line, he states, "I was very well aware of how successful the Atari video games were. Ironically, I never was or never have been a gamer. I have 3 sons and a daughter. The sons were always in varying degrees into and still into video games. I had already licensed both Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Halloween for video. I was the first one to release those movies on VHS, so I knew where to go for the license, and I thought, video games seem like the same model. It's a business doing well and expanding much like video." Soon after, Ban founded Wizard Video Games and began acquiring the game licenses. According to episode 1 of his Full Moon podcast, which awesomely enough features John Carpenter, Ban states he was able to license TCM through Bob Ramey and the Halloween license through Irwin Yablans. Contracts for the games eventually wound up in the hands of a company called VSS. VSS, which stands for Video Software Specialist, was founded by 4X Games by Apollo employees: Terry Grantham, Mike Smith, George Cocaruda, and Ed Salvo. After they felt the owner, Pat Roper, wasn't taking the right steps to stay in business. This was only further proved when the company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in November of 1982. VSS wrote games for other companies, including CBS Electronics, Cattell, Zonix, Sunrise, and of course, Wizard Games. According to Cash, Mike Smith used his connections to get the contracts for both TCM and Halloween. I'm sure it didn't take much to obtain these contracts, considering many of the founding members and employees were all seasoned and knowledgeable on video games to some degree, specifically Ed Salvo, who was responsible for the hit game Space Chase. In fact, according to Cash and a 2006 DP interview with Ed, he taught himself how to program for these things with no prior knowledge. Cash stated there wasn't any documentation or manual for the Atari 2600. He disassembled cartridge games, figured out how to drive the 2600, and made his first game. It created GPA and gave Tim and Robert the info and skills to do it. These facts alone seem to suggest that going with VSS would have been a very safe bet for Wizard Games. Wizard began marketing several games that they planned to release, first with TCM and a game called Flesh Gordon, based on the 1974 movie of the same name.
Not to be confused with the original Flash Gordon.
They marketed FG as the first adult video game and TCM as one of the first scary games, with one ad calling TCM the first violent video game. Unfortunately, Flesh Gordon would never see the light of day, but development on TCM and Halloween would conclude before the end of 1982. Many of the ads read that both TCM and FG would be available for Christmas of that year, 1982. However, TCM didn't wind up releasing until March of the next year. Now, although there isn't an exact date for when these games began development, we can create a decent timeline simply based on several articles and interviews. According to Cash, Ed left Games by Apollo sometime in late October. And according to the website GDRI, their company, VSS, became incorporated on November 24th, 1982. Although I'm unsure when they received the contracts or if they were even able to work on the games before becoming an official incorporated company, I do know that Games by Apollo bounced out final paychecks on November 11th, according to Cash, and that many of the employees, including Tim, Robert, and Cash, were all employed by early November. Yet they didn't start work on the games until VSS was incorporated, and Halloween at the very least was said to be completed before the end of December by Cash. That makes the timeline for both games about 4 to 6 weeks, which lines up with the 2006 DP interview Ed did. During this interview, the interviewer asked, "Can you talk a bit about each game that you did, what the inspiration for each one was, what the easiest/hardest part of designing it was, how long each took approximately, etc." He states, "It took about 6 weeks, but unfortunately, that wasn't all Ed had to say on the game." He goes on to say, "I'm not real proud of this one, but we had to eat." The interviewer then says, "I recall there was some public outcry over both Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Halloween's violent theme. Looking at how violent games have become now, it's almost laughable games like these or Exidy's old Death Race coin-op could create such unwanted attention, although such media attention invariably only serves to help sell more copies." To which Ed replies, "I really didn't want to do it. As a matter of fact, none of us had seen the movie and we had to watch it to get game ideas." Texas Chainsaw Massacre as a game is simple. It puts you in the neon green or baby blue overalls of Leatherface and tasks you with chasing down shrieking victims, dodging obstacles, and keeping your chainsaw gassed up. I was only able to find a single review of the game by Mark Trost from a September 1983 issue of Electronic Fun with Computers and Games that gave it a 2 out of 4 joysticks. Their main talking points were how the game doesn't always register that your chainsaw hits the characters, or the victims in this case, and saying, "Our personal objections to this kind of cartridge aside, we find it doesn't even work from a video game enthusiast standpoint." I personally played it, and it sure is a game. The premise is Simple, like I said, rev up your chainsaw, chase down the screaming victims, and try not to run out of gas as you dodge fences, cow skulls, thickets, and wheelchairs that seem to be going the speed of freaking light. I found myself getting bored pretty quickly with this one, unfortunately, mainly due to the fact that the victims kept dodging my chainsaw, and even when they didn't, I honestly couldn't tell what I did differently to get them. Not to mention, every time they're on screen, you have to hear that god-awful high-pitched ring until you either kill them or run out of gas. And honestly, if they were in front of my nice quiet cannibal farmhouse screaming like that, I'd probably commit murder too. If you kill a victim, they give you 1,000 points, and for every 5,000 you get more fuel. Style-wise, this game is lacking as well. I understand it was on the Atari. However, you can barely tell you're moving until obstacles come in from off screen and run into you, and when they do, you're temporarily stunned, which is annoying as hell, especially if you were right about to claim another victim. When you run out of gas, canisters, which count as your lives, the screen darkens, the victim runs up and kicks Leatherface in the pants, and you must restart. While I enjoyed being able to try this game, I definitely won't be returning to it anytime soon. Although you could say that TCM wasn't too well received, it didn't stop Wizard from pushing out their next game later that year. Halloween released sometime in October, possibly on Halloween. Although most credits will say it was created by Ed Salvo, he outsourced it to Tim Martin and Robert Barber. In his DP interview, he states, "Halloween was done by VSS, but we contracted it out to a couple of ex-Apollo programmers. I don't remember who." In this case, it is Tim Martin and Robert Barber with Micrographic Image. This was more common than you might think. During my interview with Cash, he stated, "It will be hard to find GPA programmers' names. They made us cover our names when media came through. They didn't want any of us getting ideas of leaving. They even made us sign worthless non-competes." When Tim and Robert were handed these contracts, they were given a lot of creative freedom to create whatever vision they had in mind. To summarize it here, a bit based on his Full Moon podcast, Band obtained these licenses, contracted out the work, and pretty much forgot about it. This was due to his busy schedule at the time. I like to believe that his main note would have been, make them violent and scary, or as violent and scary as a game could look when you can count the pixels on screen. Cash further proved this point by saying, "I can tell you the way it worked when I got hired. I was asked to write up my game proposal. This is what happened to all the Atari 800 game programmers. I was amazed that we weren't given anything to go on." The game Halloween was a bit of a departure from TCM. In this game, you play as the babysitter, and your primary goal is to rescue 5 children by bringing them to the safe rooms in order to progress to the next difficulty level, all while avoiding the killer. However, you're not completely helpless. Throughout the stages, you can find knives which can be used to temporarily stop the killer, and successfully stabbing him twice will advance the level as well. One of the coolest things about this game is how every time he shows up, it could be from any of the doors, and he might not always go for the babysitter. Sometimes he'll take out the kids as well. There's also an awesome chiptune version of the Halloween theme every time he shows up, and it's honestly pretty damn good, especially for the time. You do have to deal with the occasional blackouts and some of the doorways spawning you in different hallways entirely. This game was better received by the previously mentioned magazine and was given 3 out of 4 joysticks by the reviewer Ed Hulse, who had this to say, "Wizard's Halloween is the rarest of video games licensed from another medium. It not only offers exciting gameplay, it's remarkably faithful to the spirit of the 1978 film from which it was adapted. The basic situation which dominated John Carpenter's suspense movie classic has been effectively translated to game format." I played it for about 30 minutes and was very impressed with how much the game had to offer. You're dropped right into the action, same as TCM, but this time the shoes are on the other foot, as the killer, because for some reason they never used the names of the characters in this, can be anywhere. Navigation is simple enough, and even the animations of the walk cycle are impressive. You move up and down, you can move off the screen to the next room or doorway. Doorways at each end of the house take you to the opposite floor, and doorways in the middle of the house take you to another room. You interact with objects, of which there are 3. The knife, the killer when you knife them, and the children that you need to follow you. This function is a bit wonky, as holding it longer than a second counts as mashing the button for some reason, so I kept accidentally letting go of the kid's hand when trying to lead them to safety. And although you see the entire floor here, only half is accessible. However, this is only due to the fact that that's the area where the children generally are. All children are randomly generated and can sometimes spawn in a room right after you leave it. The goal is to rescue as many as you can and bring them to the safe room all the way on the left or right side of the house. Some rooms have a knife that allows you to stab Michael, and doorways that allow you to escape to another hallway in the house. The safe rooms are actually safe, and the killer can't hurt you or the kids, but that doesn't stop him any other time. Sometimes you'll come across a child that needs to be rescued, but the killer gets in the way, and 9 times out of 10, he's not going for you. He will literally beeline it for the kid. The good thing is that you can catch him making his way there before you have a chance to grab the kid. You can just move to the next screen if you're close enough, and the killer will despawn, so you'll have another shot at rescuing the child. However, this may not always be possible, and I've lost a few when attempting to grab them. The hardest room to deal with are the faulty wire rooms, where the lights flicker on and off. That added to the effect of the Halloween theme playing, and seeing the killer moving through the flickering lights is honestly next level, and I did find myself getting kinda tense waiting for him to pop out of doorways or the side of the screen that I was making my way to. After scoring a certain number of points, the killer gets faster, and while it's pretty easy to juke him early on, Once he starts speeding up, it gets harder to maneuver around him. I never noticed anything that explicitly said that the game is now on a higher difficulty, but since you'll see the killer often, you'll be able to tell fairly quickly after a few encounters. Honestly though, it's a solid game and one I would have loved to own back in the day if I had a chance. And before you point at your screen like Leo, the one copy that I have here on this is a replica made by an Etsy seller, hacked to the future. They do solid work, by the way, and you can even order one of these with instruction manuals included. Definitely check them out if you have a chance. Fortunately, despite the work and pride Tim and Robert took in their game, and even the resounding review from that November issue of that magazine, both games were unfortunately set to fail. In January of 1983, both games were shown at a Las Vegas CES show. According to Ban during his podcast, I went to the Consumer Electronics show, I produced maybe 1,000 of each to give out, whatever, and could not sell one. Back then, it was a big department stores that said you can't sell these are for kids, and you can't think that we're going to carry a game about a guy who's knifing other characters. This is a video game business. It's about children, it's not about horror. According to Cash, they weren't the only ones with adult games who made an appearance at the CES show. Another company called Mystique were also in attendance with their own take on adult video games. Theirs being the infamous Custer's Revenge, a tasteless game that puts you in the shoes of General Custer. Your only goal is to reach the right side of the screen to the tied-up Native American woman, all while dodging arrows, cacti, and, depending on which mode you choose, other players. According to Cash, at the show there was a controversial game called Custer's Revenge. It was in bad taste, and if I recall correctly, alluded to it really put a damper on H and TCM. Despite the reception at the CES show, both games wound up releasing. However, because of their violent nature, no major retailer would carry these games. Worse yet, for the few shops that did carry them, they wouldn't always have them on full display or would just keep them behind the counter, which led to poor sales. By the end of 1983, the video game market crash was in full swing, and video games, it seemed, were a passing fad. This led to Wizard Video Games shuttering their doors and liquidating their remaining stock. Unfortunately, they didn't seem to have enough boxes and began placing several cartridges in black boxes with some tape to identify the game body. Nowadays, a copy of either game goes for thousands, and their value will only appreciate further. After Wizard Games closed, so too did several other companies under ban before the end of the 80s, and of course throughout the years. He would open and close several other businesses, and today he continues to operate under his company, Full Moon Empire. Under this umbrella name, it manages film production, distribution of DVD, VHS, merch, and magazines, and of course, his podcast, Full Moon Freak Show. Although the world wasn't ready for violent video games back in 1983, it wouldn't stop other developers from pushing the envelope later down the line, with games like Smash TV, Splatterhouse, Sweet Home, and many more. But it wasn't until the popular game Mortal Kombat released in 1992, alongside games like Night Trap and of course Lethal Enforcers, that the ESRB would be formed to ensure that no one underage could play these games, or at the very least, buy them. Although I wasn't able to interview Tim or Robert, and they might not think too favorably on it nowadays due to the crash upending both of their game development careers, they, alongside Ed and Charles Band, were pioneers in their field. Today, and since the ESRB, PEGI, SARO, and other rating boards have been implemented, gaming has evolved to be so much more than a simple children's toy. It's become a movement, a multi-billion-dollar medium, and has shaped the world, inspired dreams, saved lives, and continues to push boundaries to allow everybody to enjoy what the medium has to offer. Even if TCM and Halloween never truly received their flowers for what they tried to do at the time, they were the foundation of the current gaming landscape, pushing the boundaries for censorship and adult themes to be present in gaming. Even now, some of the highest selling and performing games, as long as we're excluding sports games, have a T or higher rating and have told award-winning stories that in some cases have even been adapted into novels, shows, and even movies. Across the globe, over 3.3 billion people play video games, and the number continues to increase. While I don't attribute this success to violent or even adult video games entirely, those that dared to challenge the social norm helped create a more inclusive space for people of all ages and helped shape gaming into what it is today. It's weird to think, but horror games, or at the very least, scary, violent games, although not as popular back then, have become an extremely popular genre. Games like Slender, Amnesia, Outlast, Resident Evil, Silent Hill, DBD, Five Nights at Freddy's, Dead Space, Alone in the Dark, Clock Tower, and so many more brought the somewhat movie and book exclusive genre of horror to a broader light, and are still having entries made to this day. And 42 years later, Halloween is getting another game made by the company IllFonic, which coincidentally is the same company that made the TCM game from 2023. I guess history really does repeat itself. And with games like Hellraiser Revival, Resident Evil Requiem, OD, Tenebrous Somnia, Ill, Reanimal, Directive 8020, and even the recently released games like Silent Hill F and Chronos New Dawn, it's a damn good time to be a video game horror fan. Well everybody, that was the first part of our Halloween special. I hope you all enjoyed. I honestly had a blast doing research for these games, and I would love to do more videos like this. Lastly, I want to once again thank Cash for answering all my questions. It was a blast speaking to you, and if you're still watching, thanks again. With all of my Halloween shenanigans out of the way, and with our spooky season officially coming to a close, I hope you all have a happy Halloween, and I will see you all in the next video.